All right, so as he said, my name's Lynn, and I'm a full-time blogger, which is pretty cool, right? So I'm going to talk today kind of my story and tell you some lessons learned. Now, I want to kind of gauge the audience that we have here, and who here would consider themselves a new blogger. You've started, you may have a few, you may have done a few posts. Anyone? It's all right, you can be brave, it's good. We were all there at one point, right? So, all right, and how many people would consider themselves that you blog all the time? You know, maybe you're a full-time blogger. Okay. All right. In fact, I have them up here. All right. So, it's interesting because in this session, I'm going to go through some of the basics and through some of my story, right? So, if you're a new blogger, I think you're going to really love it, right? Because you're going to hopefully learn a lot from it. Now, if you are a current blogger, then hopefully you'll find at least a few items that are like, oh, that could really help me be successful. And then, of course, even if you're just a current blogger, you know, you're likely to start more blogs. So when you start the new ones, you're going to go through a lot of these processes again. So hopefully you'll find what I have useful. So I want to start out with what I consider the keys to blogging. And these are things that apply regardless of what topic you're doing, regardless of how you blog. And the first one is really having a passion for whatever topic you're blogging about. You know, I told this doctor that I was working with that I was a full-time blogger. He's my friend. And he said, man, I should do that. I should write about medical stuff or whatever. And I looked at him and I said, are you serious? You really want to write about medical stuff? I mean, I don't think you do. And I knew this guy. He was this travel guy, and he had these travel buddies, and he traveled everywhere. I said, if you want to blog, you should write about travel. And you should write about where you travel and your travel buddies and how to get cheap stuff because you love that. That's something you enjoy. That's something you do about anyways, but you're doing it on Facebook and you're doing it on these travel sites. You could just do it on a blog, and you could make money, but it's something you're passionate about. If you write about, you know, a pap smear therapy or something like that, you're going to be bored. You'll be like, that's what I do in my day job, and I barely enjoy it, you know? Like, choose something you love, right? So I said, do that. Now, the second is you need to have motivation. And I'm going to talk about this throughout the presentation. There's ways that I was motivated, and I think you'll see it also. You know, you need to find something like, well, what's my goal? What's my motivation? And I'll teach you a number of ways that I found to stay motivated blogging and how I achieved the success that I did. So I started out in June of 2005. I mean, WordPress was really in its infancy. And really, I didn't even start out thinking, I want to blog. I really started out that I'd worked at a university and I was in charge of all their web stuff. And this student worker of mine kept saying, we should do a WordPress, we should do a WordPress, we should do a WordPress. And I was like, whatever, I can just code it myself. Yeah, that's what I thought, right? You know, and if you were there during that period of time, there was a lot of feeling like that, right? Why would I use WordPress? I can just write the code myself. And that was kind of an arrogant attitude, but it was kind of the way it was. And so I was a little bit, honestly, a little bit angry or perturbed that he saw something in WordPress and I didn't see it. I didn't understand it. So I decided to just do an install, and I installed it and I was like, wow, this is pretty easy. You know, I'm able to publish content really easy with this. This is pretty cool. And so I created my first blog called Smuggle Me, which was a pretty cool name, I thought. Kind of goes with Snuggle Me, but I didn't think Snuggle Me worked so good for a guy, so I switched it to Smuggle Me. I don't know, I was just playing around, right? I was just having fun. This was my first post in June 2005. And then I started posting stuff. I remember one time I was playing a Solitaire Showdown on MSN Messenger with my little sister, right? And I killed her, right? And so I said, I'm going to post this to my blog. So I did a screen capture, I posted it, I said, I have beat my sister in Solitaire Showdown. I was like, that's awesome, right? Well, yeah, it's awesome, but does anyone besides my sister and I care? I mean, I still point her to the blog post every once in a while, but other than that, you know, nobody cares. So I learned the first lesson. You know, content matters. Are you writing something that someone else wants to read? That someone else is going to get value from what you did? I actually have a whole blogging philosophy that I give to people because I have a number of bloggers that I work with now. And I say, if it's not interesting, if it's not entertaining, if it's not valuable, then don't post it. If it doesn't satisfy those criteria, it's not worth posting on your blog. So content matters. The second lesson I did was, I started with this blog and I said, okay, I need a theme. And one of my first thoughts was, how am I going to monetize this content? I mean, that was my focus, right? I'd actually had some other websites and I'd gotten a Google check. And so I was like, how do I, do this on a blog? Now, I didn't really, and so I really looked for a theme, a WordPress theme that would incorporate the Google ads that I was already using on my own sites. And I wanted to find it early on. And it turns out, all that work that I did in 2005 for this blog that nobody read is what I use now on 5 or 6 other blogs. And it makes a good portion of my living, all of those efforts in the beginning. So I think that's a good lesson and a good benefit. Although I must admit, I've been looking around lately, there aren't as many ad-focused themes, where it's really just plug and play, where you have the theme and just turn it on and it works. That's why I've actually kept this one and not switched to others. I've debated 100 times, but I keep going back to this one because it is so focused. So then in December of 2005, it was a Christmas break and I was bored, right? Had the week off between Christmas and New Year's. And so what do tech people do when they're bored? Start another website, right? So I created another blog. And I was working at the university here doing electronic medical record, EMR. And so I said, okay, well, if I'm going to work in this world, I should really just become an expert of EMR. And I should have a place where I can show that, right? Because if I want a future job, I want a place that I can say, well, this is my knowledge base, and this is why you should hire me. So I decided I'd start an EMR blog, and everything that I'd learned along the way as I became an expert of electronic medical record, I would just put on the blog. So it was kind of a learning experience, but it was also a place for me to put it up. And then I also said, I'm a tech person, so how am I validated? I want to be the top of Google, right? Because if Google puts me at the top, that means I'm the best, right? At least that's the tech person frame of mind. So that was my second goal. And so I put it up, and I used that same template that you saw before that was ad monetized, almost because I didn't want to go looking for another one. Well, I put it up, and I started writing some content. And before, when I was getting my Google ad clicks, I was making maybe, a cent, 5 cents. Man, when I hit 10 cents a click, I was like, this is awesome. So I put up this blog, and I wrote some content, and oh wait, it's recorded, so I didn't click on it, but someone may have clicked on one of the ads, and I got like $1 or $2 for the click. I was like, this is cool, right? This is actual content with good ads, and when they click on it, I make $1 or $2 a click. And so I said, great, I'm going to do work on this and see how much traffic I can drive to it, right? It monetizes much better than all that other stuff about me and beating my sister. And so I started writing a whole lot more. And so the lesson learned here was that I had goals, right? I had these 2 goals in mind, and then I also had that monetization thing where I'm like, yeah, if I get to the top of Google and I have lots of traffic, I'm going to make a lot of money, right? Because Google's actually monetizing it well. And so I just started posting away. I mean, I was posting like crazy. I was doing my master's degree, and I'd be in class, and of course I wasn't listening to the teacher. I was just posting to my blog. I was just reading. And so I got a really good education posting to my blog. But it was good to have goals, right? And they weren't necessarily goals, I need 100 page views or something. They were goals like, I want to learn about EMR, and I want to show that I'm smart and I know this stuff, right? And I want to share that knowledge with other people. And then I wanted to be the top of Google. Well, about 6 months later, I reached that goal. I made it to the first page of Google for the search term EMR. And I reached a point where I had about 1,000 page views a day. And I thought to myself, how many people really search for electronic medical record? Everyone in this room has never even done it. They've never even heard the term EMR, right? Pretty clear, right? Yeah, so I said, well, maybe there's just not a market for it, right? I mean, people just don't go online and say, let's read about electronic medical record. And so I thought I'd tapped out, right? Like that's all the market there was 1,000 page views a day. So, it's interesting because it kind of almost feels like a failure. Like, sure, I made it to the top of Google, and sure, I even was getting a check. I called it date money, right? It was enough money to take my wife out on a date, and she wasn't too disappointed with me writing all the time. But, you know, it really kind of felt like a failure because I reached 1,000 and I was like, well, that's all I could grow it. And so I kind of just set it at the back burner. And it was pretty cool, though. I mean, I even had an advertiser come and say, hey, I want to advertise on your site, mostly because I was at the top of Google. And so I'm like, okay, how about $60 a month? You know, that's what I was making with Google ads. And so they paid me. And so I would post maybe once or twice a month. But I basically just set it to the side and said, well, that market's not big enough, right? I can't earn enough money. But what I did learn during this process is I learned to be a stats addict. I mean, I've even written posts about it. I just loved the statistics of who was viewing my site and where were they coming from, which content did they really want to see, and where did they come from, so I could do more of that, right? Because that's how I learned. I learned, oh, they're coming from there. Let's do more of that so I get more traffic. Or I'd say, ooh, they really liked when I posted lists of whatever. Oh, I should do more lists like that. And here's the two stats that I use most is the WordPress.com stats plugin, which actually had just come out. So it was really new then. Now it's been around a while. Google Analytics is interesting if you want to see how long they've been there and stuff. Then the ad stats, of course, is always interesting, right? How much money am I making is an interesting stat to look at, especially once you get a decent amount of traffic. Then you can say, okay, well, how do I optimize it? A lot of people like to use comments as a statistic, like how am I doing? To me, comments wasn't as interesting. I preferred the money, right? If a lot of people are commenting but I'm not making anything, well, okay, that's cool, but it's not as cool, right? And especially in the beginning, people just don't want to comment. I mean, they've done studies and the curves are pretty clear. You know, it's something like 90% of people just like to lurk. You know, then there's about 8% that, you know, will occasionally comment, and then there's the 2 that do all the commenting. And so, like, to me, that's not the measure of success. The other statistic programs are really better, and what they do is they provide a motivation. I work with a lot of bloggers now on some of my other blogs, and I want them to get that stats program right away. Because I'm telling you, when they write a post and they see that it's seen by 300 people, they're like, wow, I'm going to do that again, right? And you feel the same way. It's really motivating when you see a nice spike in traffic to do more. So that goes back to my initial point, right? What's your motivation? Well, for me, statistics and seeing the site grow is a huge motivating factor. And then, of course, I call it spikeage. And it was actually better when WordPress.com stats had the bar graph. I mean, had the line graph instead of the bar graph. I don't know if people have seen that change. It makes me angry they changed it, but. You know, but the cool thing, I mean, when you have this and you're going along and you're like, wow, I just spiked up, you know, this is a spike, right? And then I got down here, I'm like, well, these ones were spikes, but now they're not, right? and it's really motivating. And you sit there on your stats thing and you wait 10 seconds and you click and you're like, wow, I just got 100 page views. It's really motivating and it's really exciting that people are doing it. And so that, you know, for me, stats are where it's at. I still look at them even today, you know, 5 years later, far too much. So then I went into another stage that I called the paid blogging stage, and it was with a company called Pay Per Post. I was actually the 61st blogger to sign up for Pay Per Post. Now, I don't know if you know Pay Per Post. It's somewhat a little bit controversial now. They're called IZEA. They've kind of rebranded themselves. Social Spark, you may know. Jules in the back was there at the beginning too, huh? How many do they have now? 3 million bloggers? I don't know. Oh, okay. At least, yeah. I mean, I know they passed 500,000 bloggers at one point, but you know, I didn't hear after that. So I was the 61st person to sign up for it, and I thought it was cool. In fact, I'd already written a post about So You Think You Could Dance. I liked one of the dancers, so I wrote about it, right, on one of my blogs. So I went to Pay Per Post, and they had it, and they said, we'll pay you $5 if you include this link to the So You Think You Could Dance site. I was like, cool, I already wrote a post. I copied the code, pasted it into my blog post, I made $5. I was like, now this is what we're talking about, right? This is a good way to make money. I mean, it was even stuff I did. And so I got really active into it, and I was posting all the time. And the Pay Per Post world has changed a little bit since those early days, but I had a lot of fun. And it was an incredible motivator. I mean, it's amazing what $5 for a post will do to motivate you when you were just doing it for fun before, right? $5 is a lot more than nothing. And then I would do $10 posts sometimes, and that was crazy. And then, you know, and so I actually made a few $1,000s, something like that, just doing posts. But the interesting thing was, in order to do a paid post, you had to do a regular unpaid post. So you had to at least do every other. And so I wanted to do paid posts, so I had to think of, well, what would I write for an unpaid post? And so I had to write a lot more. And it motivated me to do a lot more. So I would start writing that, and then I'd have to think of some unpaid post, which is actually pretty easy. And so I'd start writing a bunch of content. Plus, it also had a really interesting characteristic, which it kind of created this community of bloggers. In fact, Jules is one of my friends from that community from when we first started. But it was really neat how the community worked, because we would drive traffic to each other's sites, right? We would visit each other, we would comment on each other's, and that was a great motivator. At the beginning, when I was still learning, well, how does blogging work? And so being part of that community, we shared traffic and we shared knowledge and we learned from each other, right? And we'd see someone else, oh, you did that and you saw a spike in traffic? Well, I can do that too. And so the whole social aspect, which you can still do today, I know a lot of the women like to go to BlogHer, right? And I think it's for these reasons. It's really motivating when some of your BlogHer friends come and visit your site. And it's more fun to do it together and you learn from each other. And so that's really a good motivating factor when you're blogging. And paper posts for me was that. I mean, we even created forums and we did all sorts of, and Ted Murphy, who started, is just absolutely insane. And so he had created this interesting culture. It was a lot of fun to be around. But I also learned something, that you really shouldn't believe anything you read, which is only a partial overstatement. And really, I say it this way because you really need to be careful what you read. Because I saw all these people who were not technical at all reading stuff and following it like blind sheep, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, that's just wasting your time, right? But that's why it's good to be in a community too, if you have trusted people that you can learn from and you can bounce ideas off of. Twitter's made it really amazing. Twitter wasn't even happening at this time. You can bounce ideas like, is this worth my effort? And then they can tell you back and say, no, that's a scam, or that's a waste of time, or you should do this instead. And so you have to be careful what you read. So as I did this, I was posting all the time. I mean, I was posting 6 times a day to get these paid posts, because I was allowed 3 paid posts, so I had to do 3 unpaid, right, every day. And so I was just posting and I was trying to make as much money as I could with this paid blogging. It was really exciting culture. And I did it on a WordPress.com blog, and this was when WordPress.com had just been launched. And I was posting all the time, and I made it to the top blog on WordPress.com. I passed up Scobleizer, or Scoble, if you know Scoble, he's a famous blogger. I was above him, right? He was like the top dog, and I passed him. I was like, this is so cool, right? I mean, and most of the traffic, as I looked at my stats, was from So You Think You Could Dance, because it was an easy interim blog post for me. I would just say, I just grab a movie and write a few sentences about what I thought of the dance or the dancers or who was best, and then I had it, and I was getting all this traffic to it. So I made it to they had a top blog list at the time. I made it to the first one on WordPress.com. In fact, I even wrote a post about it. I said I beat Scoble on WordPress, and he came and commented and said, good job. But then I wake up one morning, I go to my blog. It's the #1 on WordPress.com. I'm making all this money paid posting, right? In the thousands. And then I try to log in, and it says TOS violation. Terms of service violation. I'm like, great. No, I wouldn't be paid out a lot of the stuff if I didn't have a blog. And of course, I think part of the reason they did it is I was the #1 blog on WordPress.com. So I was pretty visible. And it was kind of like, should you be doing paid blogging on it? And I think obviously their answer was, no, you shouldn't. Did they tell me? They didn't send me an email. They didn't do anything. I just looked up. It said TOS violation. I'm like, great, this is awesome. And I was like, what am I going to do? And then I didn't know how pay-per-post would react either. I sent them an angry email, as you can imagine, saying, what are you doing taking it down? Can I get my blog? Can I, what's going on? And of course, they didn't answer me, which I've told Matt, who started WordPress, he said they didn't respond. I'm like, yeah, right. But anyways, they didn't respond to me. And so then I was like, great, what am I going to do? But I learned an important lesson from this, right? The platform that you use to blog matters. If you were in the previous session, he talked about Ning, right? And Ning pulled it out from under him and said, and he lost $600 worth of development because they pulled it out. Well, I mean, the same thing kind of happened with me with WordPress.com because of their terms of service. Did I know that they didn't have paid blogging? No, I don't think they knew either, although they had this, you can't advertise. So what does that mean, right? And so I think that was their justification. But I had no recourse. I mean, I guess I could have sued them or something, right? But, like I want to go there. I emailed them and they gave me no answer. And so the platform matters. So if you're on WordPress.com, you're subject to their terms of service. Or if someone else is hosting your blog, you're under their terms of service. But the beauty is that WordPress has a lot of options, right? You can just host your own. And so that does it. And the same goes if you're using Blogger, right? You're under Google's permission base, right? Which I hope no one in this room uses that. But so then what did I have to do? Well, I learned the next great lesson, that you better back up your blog. The only problem was that this was so early in the WordPress.com days that they didn't have a tool to back up. I mean, it just didn't exist. Like, it was too early. Now they have some really cool options and some things available. But, and actually, Matt told me that now if they yank you down, you can still get a backup from them if you ask. I hope to never try that. But I didn't have a backup. I think I had one thing, but I really didn't have much, right? I'm like, what am I going to do? Well, there's a good thing called Google and Google's cache. And so I went to Google's cache. And luckily, I'd been doing it for a little while. And in Google's cache, they'd cached, my feed of my blogs. And in fact, they'd cached the feed of my blogs for all the individual days. And so, long story short, it took me about a day. I recovered all of my blog posts, but about, I think, 2 of them, because those were the most recent 2. And I got probably 70% of my comments, which was enough for me. And so I was able to recover, but it took me about almost an entire day going through Google's cache and pulling it in and putting it there. But I just put it on my own self-hosted WordPress install. The only reason I'd used WordPress.com in the first place was because I was doing paid blogging, and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't trust this company. I didn't know if they'd even pay me. I didn't even give them proper information when I signed up the first time. So I just used this throwaway blog on WordPress.com to get started because I was like, I don't know what this is. Turns out it is legitimate, and and the company is strong. So then when they paid me, I put in my proper information. but so that was the only reason I used it. So I switched it over to my own self-hosted WordPress, and that's when I found this TV niche. I saw that I was getting all this traffic of these TV shows, and it turns out on my own self-hosted blog, I put that same template that I'd used that had all the monetization built in. I was like, well, what other template am I going to use, right? This is the one I know. Slapped it on there. Well, now I was making my paid blogging, and it turns out people were actually clicking on the ads. I was like, great, I just found another revenue stream. So while it kind of sucked getting kicked off WordPress.com, it was kind of great, right? Because now it was on my own blog, and I was making paid blogging, and I was making the ads on there. So I just found this new revenue stream. I was like, this is pretty cool. I wonder how big I can make this TV sites, right? So I started writing about more and more TV. And actually, the name of the blog when I first started was called Something for Nothing, which I think is a nice, ironic name. But so I called it Something for Nothing, but I started writing about TV all the time, and I would still do some paid blogging, but I was like, hey, this TV stuff makes some okay money through the click-throughs. It was still only 1 to 5 cents a click, sometimes 15 or whatever, but unlike EMR, there's a lot of people who watch TV shows, right? I mean, there's 20 million people who watch Dancing with the Stars each week, so there's a lot of people that could come and read my blog. So while I couldn't make as much per click, I could drive a lot more volume of traffic. I said, okay, let's try to scale this up. And so thus my TV network was born. But I did learn that not all monetization is equal, right? I mean, even on WordPress.com, you can't monetize it if you can't place ads, right? And different content monetizes differently. So that was a good lesson to learn. But if you have volume, does it really matter? You know, if you get 10 cents every click, but you have 1 million clicks, that's pretty good, right? or you can make $1 million from one click. So there's different ways to monetize it. So I decided, well, something for nothing isn't the perfect domain for this, so I decided to splurge. As you can tell, I'm a pretty bootstrap type of approach to this. I don't spend money on much, so I finally paid the $50 a year, and I bought 5 domains so that they would actually be on this show name. I was like, this is great, because I'm already getting great search engine traffic. If it's named that, I'll get even more, right? So I purchased it, and I created what I called the Pure TV network. In my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to create this network of TV blogs, and I'm going to be huge, right? Which, I could do, maybe. But what I learned in this expansion is that just because it only takes 5 minutes to install a WordPress blog, which it literally does, at least for me now, I mean, it's that simple, just doesn't mean that you should. Because just because you installed the blog doesn't mean anyone's going to read it. It doesn't mean you're going to have the time to create the content that people will actually read. And it also doesn't mean that you're going to have the time to do the marketing that will get people there to read the great content that you've created, right? So you can install a blog really quickly, but those other things take a lot longer, creating great content and driving traffic to it. And so I started with these 5 blogs, and they were my 5 favorite TV shows, so I just did them. And I learned a lesson. Well, 3 of them did really well, and I enjoyed doing it, and they drove traffic, and I had some great tools. And a couple of them, I just wasn't as motivated. Like, they weren't as interesting to write about. They were fun to watch on TV, but they just didn't lean themselves to a blog that well. And I didn't have the time, because now I was up to 5 blogs, 5 TV blogs, plus my EMR one, which I'm still petering away, right? And so I just didn't have the time to do it. And so, that goes back to the other lesson learned, too, about failure, right? I mean, 2 of those blogs failed, and I just shut them. In fact, I think it was 3. I just shut them down and just forwarded them to the other, and that's okay, though, right? That's part of the learning experience. But you want to be careful how quickly you expand. Just because you can have another blog doesn't mean you should. So the next step was scaling the blog. So my TV stuff was doing pretty good, but it wasn't monetizing great, and like the EMR stuff. And so I still like the EMR stuff. And then something really interesting happened. So I had my EMR site that was making me date money. I was taking my wife out each month. And it was doing okay. And then something called the EMR stimulus package, otherwise known as Obama's stimulus package, right, came into fruition. And as part of that, they gave 18, and some estimates up to 40 potential $1 billion to go towards electronic medical record. Well, I read about this really early because I was still involved in it and I was still learning. I saw, and I was like, ooh, they're going to give money there. That sounds like a good topic for my blog, right? So I started writing about it. And I wrote about it a few times really early on. Well, as I started writing about it, I got listed on the search engines for the stimulus money really high. And so I started getting more and more traffic. When I did it, yeah, I guess you could say the stimulus money worked for me. I went from 1,000 page views a day, although at this point it had really degraded down to maybe 500 page views a day. But then I started writing about the stimulus money, and people were interested. All these doctors like, wow, how can I get government handout, right? And so they started searching for it, and they came to my site, and they were like, well, how do I implement it? Well, I'd written a lot of stuff about that, and so I had a lot of content out there. And so my traffic went from the 500 to 1,000 page views a day, shot up to about 5,000 page views a day. I'm like, this is cool. And then I had a couple more advertisers like, hey, how do I advertise on your site? And I'm like, maybe I should do a formal advertising thing. So I went and made this little button, which I still use today. And I put it there, and I said, advertise here, right? And I linked to a page that had all the details, how much page views I did and how much I'm going to charge. Pretty straightforward. I didn't want to do a whole sales thing. That wasn't really me. I wanted to write content and collect their money, right? And so I put that up, and then it just started expanding. 5,000 page views a day, and now I'm up to 7,000 or 8,000 page views a day. And my advertisers went from 1 or 2 advertisers to now 20 or 30.
Are you selective about who runs ads on your blog?
So I'm somewhat selective. Although what I do sometimes, if I don't like someone that's advertising, I'll often just price them out, right? So like, yeah, I guess, if you pay me $1,000 a month, then maybe I would take you.
Don't research who you take on.
So I do reserve the right to approve their ad, but so far it hasn't been an issue. Those that wanted to advertise, there was only one that I was a little shady, and so then that's how I priced them out. And they don't advertise anymore. But yeah, for the most part, I'm pretty open, and I clearly define this as ad space. So, if my readers can't see it says ad, and then they see the ad, well, then that's a problem for them, I think. So, but I mean, so far they've all been really legitimate advertisers, so it hasn't been an issue. But I also learned a lesson. There's a plugin called WP Super Cache, and I'd never applied it to my EMR site. I knew all about it, but I was like, yeah, Dig's never going to pick me up. I'm never going to go there and get all this massive traffic. Well, now I was, and so yeah, guess what? WP Super Cache is free, and it works. And it's really easy to set up. I thought it would be a lot harder, but you install it and you click a few options and it works. So now I use it on all my sites. And if you don't know about WP Super Cache, you should just install it. It's really easy.
How did it help you?
Huh?
How did it help you?
It helps for any spikes in traffic or any large amounts of traffic.
Yeah.
Saves you all the
Take all
bandwidth.
that on without crashing.
Yeah, it basically creates files so that it can just load HTML files rather than hitting the database every time. So it saves you a lot. Plus, all of this is happening, right? I'm seeing this major amounts of traffic. On one of my TV sites, I made it to 47,000 page views in one day. That's pretty cool. Now, if I didn't have WP Super Cache on that, it would have destroyed my host, right? In fact, I probably would have lost my hosting account if I didn't have it, or they would have come and told me to put it on. But they would have shut me down in the meantime. So when you put it on, I'm paying $7 a month for a host, and I'm doing 47,000 page views in one day, and they're fine. I mean, that's nothing. $7 a month. I've actually expanded now, so I actually have 3 accounts. So I'm at a whopping $21 a month for all my blogs, right? I mean, huh?
Who is your host right now?
I use Bluehost, so we could talk hosting sometime. So the next one is a lesson about consistent readers. Some people say, yeah, consistent readers is where it's at. And it's cool when you have consistent readers, right? It's cool to think that someone's coming and reading you every day. And that's great, mostly, right? It has its own challenges, because when you have consistent readers, well, then you have to blog consistently. It kind of takes some of the fun, right? When they're wanting you to blog and you're like, I'm a little tired, right? Although it's kind of good from the motivation standpoint, because sometimes you're like, they're going to be waiting, and I better make sure I deliver. But consistent readers are interesting and good. And they have value. Now, how well they monetize is another question, right? And I'm still trying to figure that out. But as I look at it, I don't think they actually monetize as well as someone who just searched and found your site. They're more likely to click on an ad than someone who comes there every day because they just read the stuff and then leave, right? They've already seen the ads or whatever. So, consistent readers are great, and it creates an interesting community. Like my TV stuff has this following of people who just love the show and they read all the time, which is cool, but it has its downsides. Another one is that advertisers and revenue is awesome, right? I mean, who doesn't love making money? But, mostly. It has its downsides too. Like first is, now you have to maintain traffic, right? Especially if you have someone paying you for each month. If it's just pay-per-click, right, well, then you don't make money unless you're relying on that money, and then, yeah, you need to maintain the traffic. But if you have advertisers that are paying you, then you start getting a little concerned if the traffic drops. And you got to like, oh, great, I got to deal with this. I got to find a way to get more traffic. And that's much more stressful than when you're just blogging because you just love it, right? That's a different model, and it's a different feeling that happens. Plus, you also need an accountant when you start making money. And accountants aren't cheap. In fact, my accountant's here. I met him on Twitter, and he blogs, and so that's why we met. And so that's why I chose him as my accountant. I like someone who's tech savvy. and he's given me a great deal, and he's given me great services. But, I mean, that's an extra expense, and there's other stuff involved because you have to make sure you deal with Uncle Sam properly. Otherwise, you can get in trouble. All right. So the other lesson learned is the talk of new sources of traffic. I think this is a really interesting thing, right? Because when you're blogging, it's two parts. You create content, but you also have to drive traffic. And so how do you do that? Well, there's no one answer, and it depends on the blog. But what's really been interesting is when I started, it was all writing content, and I was doing search engine optimization, essentially, trying to get other people to link to me. I was commenting on other people's blogs, which is a great way to start, right? You get to interact with people, you learn from them. They send some visitors your way, maybe they blog about you and link to you. Well, then over time, I found, and it's weird, it's almost cyclical, like almost every 6 months, I found a new way to promote it. For example, Twitter wasn't even around when I started. But now Twitter makes up probably 5 to 10% of my traffic on my sites. And so I found this new way with Twitter to drive traffic to all of my sites. And that's cool, right? I mean, it's neat to find these new sources. Another example is the electronic medical record stuff. I wanted to find new traffic. And how do you find new traffic for electronic medical record? The really exciting field of electronic medical record. And so I went on to LinkedIn, and they opened up these groups, right? I don't know if anyone's used LinkedIn groups. Well, that's perfect. It's a bunch of doctors and tech people that are, you know, you can really see, oh, that's a doctor, or this is an EMR consultant, or this is an EMR vendor, or this is a healthcare IT specialist or something. And they're in these groups that are really specific to that niche. I'm like, this is great. Throw up some links, you know, start some discussion. But you have to learn the new technology, and you have to just start participating. People are afraid, I mean, to go and just screw up, right? Or maybe to look dumb or something. Well, if you don't want to look dumb, you shouldn't blog, right? I mean, it's going to happen, right? Everyone makes mistakes. You can do your best, but you know you're going to look dumb at certain points, and that happens. But that's okay. That's part of the learning experience too. And the same when you're finding new sources of traffic. Sometimes you might use a new source of traffic, and you may screw up and make yourself really look like a fool because you're like, in this community, you shouldn't do it that way. You know, it needs to be more peripheral, signature, instead of just spamming them, you know. So you have to be careful of those things. But it's really neat when you find this new source, and then it becomes like a stable for you, right? So Twitter, for me, is just a stable. I don't really have to work on it much. It just keeps generating traffic. So I do it once, and I still cultivate it to some extent, interacting and whatnot, but it just becomes a stable part of my marketing for my blogs. So then the other lesson is that, you know, monetization is never over. And that really comes in two parts. The first one is you can always optimize a little better when it comes to monetizing your site, moving the ads around, changing the colors, the size of the ad. They created some standard ones that that get paid more than others. I mean, there's always little tweaks that you can do to help improve how much money you're making. And that's really cool, because if you think about it, you make a little tweak once, and your ad revenue increases forever, right? That's a cool idea. And that's why I like blogging so much, is you can do lots of little one-time tweaks, and if they improve it forever. And it keeps going forward, and you're still doing the same amount of effort creating content and driving traffic to your site. So and then the second part really is about finding new opportunities to monetize it, right? I mean, who would have thought that my electronic medical record blog would allow me to quit my job? It's the major reason. But it's because new opportunities came up. There were new developments that really drove a lot of traffic to my site. Not to mention, I've actually found new ways to monetize it beyond the ads that I sell, beyond affiliates, or I find new affiliates. That's like, oh, this affiliate actually works really well and can make me a lot of money. And once you get a certain amount of traffic, people start coming to you, and then it becomes more of actually like filtering out which ones will work and which ones won't, which ones aren't worth my effort or not. But the monetization's never over, because there's always people trying to find attention, right? That's what blogs provide. You've got their attention. They're reading you, and you can provide that attention to an advertiser. And that's what they pay for. So what's my future in blogging? You know, for me, there is no future. You know, like blogging is just kind of a part of life. I mean, like I would just do it because I enjoy it, right? Back to the passion thing. To me, it's fun. I work with the 12 and 13-year-old in Scouts at my church. And I say to them, I say, you know what you do with your video games is the same as me. You do a repetitive motion, and you watch a score go up. That's what I do with blogging, right? Now, I have a little intellect in the content that I'm creating and how I'm creating it, but they have a little intellect in how they play their game too, right? And then my score, though, is statistics and dollars. But that's what I'm doing. It's just part of life. It's fun. It's almost a game for me. How quickly can I get it to go up? And how can I monetize it well? And so for me, it's just life. Plus, it opens up a lot of really interesting and crazy opportunities. For example, I've been backstage at a bunch of TV shows, and which is kind of fun. I was at Dancing with the Stars at the finale. My wife and I were right behind the judges. But it was neat, right? I mean, do I want to do that every day? No, but that's a cool experience. I actually had a satellite radio show contact me, and I'm going to do some interviews for him at the start of next month. I was like, who would have thought I'd be a radio guy interviewing people? Not me, but it's a cool experience, right? And I've had media and press access to all sorts of events. America's Got Talent filmed here, and I got to go see their taping 3 months before it actually went. That's a cool opportunity. Or I go to conferences for free because I'm press at that event. And there's a lot more I could tell you about those experiences. Plus, it's so important to remember, I kind of covered this already, it's not just writing. That's my favorite thing. People ask me, what do you do? And I say, I'm a blogger. And once they get the glazed look out of their eyes, they're like, wait, so you write and you make money? And I, of course, answer, yeah, that's what I do. But it's not what I do, right? I mean, sure, I guess at its technical standpoint, I write and I make some money, right? But I do a lot more. I drive traffic. I write in a certain way so that more traffic will come. And actually, that's my next point, is SEO, right? Search engine optimization. Here's my 4 keys real quick, because I know we're coming close to an end. But one is using the SEO plugin. I use the all-in-one SEO pack, right? It does a lot of the work for you, and it takes care of a lot of the effort. If you do that, and you do good titles that have good keywords that you want to drive traffic to, that's going to drive a lot of traffic. The next one is also having tags and categories that match those titles, right? So on my electronic medical record blog, I don't know if I've ever written a title that didn't have EMR in it. If I have, it's very few. In fact, there's a few, but not very often, right? I always have EMR or electronic medical record or some variation there because I want that. And the tags are almost always there, categories. And then the third is doing internal linking. So if I wrote about an EMR pricing for a company called Allscripts, and I ever talk about pricing from Allscripts, I'm going to link back to that previous content. That internal linking does a lot. And of course, there's conferences that do SEO, but these are my core principles that I've used on my blogs pretty successfully, and I think you'll see success too. And then I call it newly popular keywords, right? Who knew that EMR stimulus would be a popular keyword on Google? Well, it turns out I saw that it was coming, and so I wrote about it early, and I captured that newly popular keyword. And now it's paying benefits long term. Every TV show, right? Dancing with the Stars, this is my secrets. No one's stealing. It's all right, you can. Dancing with the Stars 2011 is going to be a popular keyword in 2011, right? And same with Dancing with the Stars 2012, because it's going to keep going, I'm sure, with 20 million viewers, right? But these are things that you can prime your site for, and you can write for it so that you're there, and you capture those things before anyone else does, because they don't realize, that's going to be a popular one. Or the reality TV shows, the names of the people, right? That's another example. I could talk a lot about SEO. The other thing for me is I don't pay for promotion. Maybe. I'm considering doing some stuff now. But if you do, I think it's really important that, okay, well, if I spend $25, what am I getting for it, right? So it's really paying attention. Now, if I spend a half hour linking on other blogs and writing and commenting, to me, that's not paying. That's just enjoying part of the experience, right? And so any benefit that I get is like free money to me. And all of this stuff has been done with zero marketing. I haven't paid anyone for any advertising on any of these blogs. It's all just been free stuff. And then just love the process, I mean, it's part of the experience. Enjoy what it is. And if you don't blog. There's other things, right? To me, blogging was a hobby. Other people like to do their yard, and other people like to cut hair or whatever they want to do. I like to blog, right? I like to create websites and drive traffic. So here's a little bit about my blogs 5 years later, right? So I have the 2 electronic medical record blogs. and I have 4 TV-related blogs. These are the ones that really make money. I have other ones, but and then I have 2 BuddyPress blogs, which we could talk about. It's a whole nother model of what I'm trying to create, because I really only work on my blogs part-time, and then BuddyPress, my BuddyPress stuff is what I'm working on full-time now. So over these 5 years, I'm estimating I did about 6,000 blog posts, right? So I wanted to show this because you're sitting there like, wow, that's cool, you became a full-time blogger. But I did a lot. Now as I look back, I think, man, did I do 6,000? I don't know. I was just having fun, right? I was just writing about something that I enjoy, that I'm passionate about. And it turns out, in aggregate, it gets to be a large number. But I didn't really think about that. That wasn't my intent when I started. It's had 13 million page views or somewhere in that neighborhood on all of them. And I've made far too many comments on other people's blogs. Or, you know, at one point when I was starting the EMR site, I made 1,000 posts on a forum trying to drive traffic to my site because I wanted to really monetize it. And you know, 2 days ago at a conference, I told a little bit of this story to some people, and he said, "Wow, that's pretty neat to hear about, you know, your media empire that you built." I'm like, I don't, you know, I'm not sure it's a media empire. You know, that seems like a bit of exaggeration. But what is cool is that, you know, I really am king of my blogging world, right? I can do whatever I want. I can do whatever I want on the blogs with them, and I can play with what I want. If I want to post regularly, I can. If I want to take a week off, I can, right? So I guess in some ways I am king of my own blogging world. But really, that's what makes it so cool, and that's why I love blogging. So.
John, I have a couple. Is there a certain amount, length of content each time you post? Like a page or 2 pages or what?
Right, so length is an interesting question. Some people say, especially in the electronic medical record world, they're like, I can't post that regularly, you know, and they have to do this all-encompassing essay on it. And that works fine, right? But that's selling to a specific crowd that wants the all-encompassing everything that's involved in this topic, right? That's not what I do. I'm actually the opposite. I want to cover one minute detail. I want to cause people to think, and then I want them to join the discussion around what I'm saying, right? And so I want it short content. Plus, I think we want instant gratification. That's why YouTube is so good. You know, no one watches a YouTube video over 2 minutes, right?
You have a forum on yours. Is that how you create?
Well, just the comments, just the WordPress comments.
And then how often do you post? You've got
Every blog is different. And actually, all my TV blogs now, I have a bunch of writers. They just love to write about the TV shows. So they write about it, and they like the interaction in the comments.
do you find it works?
It depends on every niche. So my EMR site, I have 2. One of them I post every day, and the other one's a couple times a week. And the TV, I mean, I have 5 writers, so they would post all sorts of times, and it depends on the show. But the show's really cyclical too, right? If it's in season, then we're probably posting 10 times a week. If it's not in season, then a couple times a week,
And your
maybe.
medical site, exactly what is your posting? What makes you unique that
Yeah.
you have so many readers? What is
We'll talk after. But I mean, I've done 1,100 posts on it.
niche is what you have.
Yeah, I've done 1,100 posts, so what haven't I written about, right? Do you have a question? Oh, okay. Any other questions? Or?
Yeah, earlier you said half paid and half not. What do you mean by that on your contract?
Oh, so that was when I was doing paid posting. So they required that if I did a paid post, I had to do a not paid.
They require.
Yeah, as part of it. Do you have one? And I think this is...
Do you have something against Utah?
No. So Crash Utah, that's a good thing you asked. So Crash Utah was my very first website. I was going to BYU, and Crash Utah was supposed to be like Crash a Party because it was kind of a city search for Utah County. And so Crash Utah was had lists of all the restaurants and activities and stuff, and it did amazingly horrible. So, but it taught me a lot, right? I learned a lot in the lessons. And so it's just kind of become my own brand, 10 years later, I'll never depart from Crash Utah. It's funny though, when I gave my mom an email address on it, so she gives it out as her initials at crashutah.com, which I'm sure she gets lots of questions. But it's fun. All right, but I'll be out here after if anyone wants to talk, so thank you.